is 8:18 on this Wednesday morning. And I'm delighted to say that we're going to take a look ahead now to what 2021 has in store for athletics. And we're joined by Ireland's fastest woman, Phil Healy. Good morning, Phil. How are you getting on?
Good morning. Thanks a million for having me on.
So I guess a lot of people were looking back on 2020 as a really bad year and hoping that 2021 would be better. As someone who notched up 3 national titles in 2020, you didn't have a bad run of things.
Absolutely. 2020 took off to a great start, and I opened over 400, I opened over 200, and I managed to break the indoor 200 meter record at AIT Grand Prix, which is absolutely unbelievable, and one of my goals for the year. So that really helped me on my Olympic ranking point. So that was great to achieve before everything really clamped down. But look, it was a year of adaptation. It was a year of change for all athletes. But to have national championships, both indoor and outdoor, was absolutely super, and especially outdoor, considering everything that happened throughout the summer. And look, sport is only a small component in the bigger picture of things, but it was great that as athletes that we did have the opportunity to race, and that I did get the national titles then over 100 and 200 last summer.
I saw you saying in September that you were about to go into a winter training camp, basically. Has that extended all the way through until this very moment, and does it continue now for the next couple of months?
Absolutely, yeah. So we kicked off again in September, and it was great to get back into your normal surrounds. And I have my track here in Waterford with the RSC and my gym with WIT Arena. So it's great to have those facilities. And look, at the moment, there's so much unknown for all athletes. Obviously, everything is gearing towards the Olympics, and we have that second shot at it in 2021. We also have European indoors, which are the first week of March. We were meant to have World Indoor Championships as well, but they have now been cancelled again. They were on last year as well. But there is unknown, as I said. Will Europeans go ahead? At the moment, they are. For all athletes, we have to just go ahead and plan as if they are. But with races, it's so hard to judge. There is such a lack of races here in Ireland, but obviously, considering everything that is going on as well, it is hard to plan. But I think it's harder on the coaches more so than the athletes, because we can just do the program, we can do what we're meant to do. But for them, is it going ahead? Is it not going ahead? Are we gearing towards Tokyo with something in the middle? But look, we will plan as if European indoors are going ahead. I'm lucky to have the standard from last year, so I necessarily don't need a race, but hopefully they do go ahead and that we do have a chance to race again this indoor season.
Phil, can I ask you just a little bit? Sorry, and just wanted to ask you a little bit. Obviously, we look forward in a moment, but looking back, when you were running so well, and you're kind of in one of those peak years of your career as an athlete, it's a relatively short window where you get to say, yeah, that's me at my absolute peak. Did you feel at any point that you were missing out, and was there any bitterness about what was going on? Because it's a very natural human response to that.
Absolutely, and especially when the year kicked off so well in February, where I broke the national record. I'm like, right, I ran the quickest that I've ever ran, so I'm obviously in the shape of my life at that moment. So say the year previous, I broke my foot just off a wobble off a step, so I'm like, everything is gearing up to the best year that it possibly could be. And I don't want, say, 2021 to be a year where it wasn't as good as 2020 or something like that. So there is that slight doubt in your head as well, but it gives you that extra motivation to push things on, to make things better, and just to accept it, because at the end of the day, you can only control the controllables. But yes, obviously we would all have loved to have Tokyo last year when you're in the shape of your life. Other athletes, it's an extra opportunity for them to secure qualification and things like that, but it just pushes you on. You had no choice, and you just had to adapt around it, and I'm looking forward to preparing for it this year as well.
Was that straightforward? Was it easy enough to not linger in the bitterness of missing out on that year, or did you have to use all of the resources that are available to you, like the sports psychology and all that kind of stuff, to get through it and think your way out of that problem?
Yeah, definitely, and it's definitely important to lean on your support team around me. But Shane, my coach, he was well ahead of the game, and before we came to national championships, he was and national championships were the last weekend in February of 2020, and he was like, look, there's a high chance that this is going to be your last race. And even prior to that, he was like, things are going to change, it's not going to be a normal summer and things like that. So he was ahead of the game. He had me tuned into it all. But when you get that final moment of when Tokyo is actually cancelled, there's all this is it going to be cancelled, is it not going to be cancelled? But when it finally is, you have that sinking feeling. But there was one day I text Shane when I was in isolation because we had moved everything to Wexford because we knew everything was going to close. And I'm like, what if I don't qualify the next time? Do you know, like I was lying in 29th position out of a 56 that will qualify. And you just have those doubts as an athlete, but end of the day, you just have to pick yourself up and push straight through. But like my sports psychologist here last day would have checked in with me an awful lot during lockdown, and that was great resource. And then having Shane around me all the time, and I had one training partner as well at the time when we could possibly do it with restrictions and stuff like that. So it is so important to lean on the people around you. But I would have to say Shane was ahead of the game, so I was prepared in a way that it wasn't just like a sudden shock of everything being taken away from me.
How big is that challenge, that selecting that time that you're going to peak for and absolutely nailing it, and then you throw in the added challenge of not knowing when that exact moment is you need to peak for? I guess that comes back to what you're saying earlier on about the challenge being on the coaches to actually have a proper program in place. Can you pick and choose when you're going to peak this year, for example, if the Olympics happens to happen maybe 1 month later than it's originally slated for?
Absolutely. And look, for me, I just turn up to training and do the program, and like obviously myself and Shane have a great relationship in terms of like I get to have input and different things like that, but it boils down to Shane planning the whole thing. And that's where it comes back to, say, like last year we knew that Olympic qualification, it came to a certain point where qualification no longer counted. So if anyone raced from April on, it didn't count until December this year. So it didn't make planning as difficult, and it was just training and pushing things through, and we had an extra window of opportunity to make things better. But when it comes to this year, we know that Olympic qualification has opened up again. We know that every other country is preparing for European indoors at the moment. As I said, I'm lucky to have the standards, so I necessarily don't need to race, but other athletes are in a position where they need to race if they're targeting European indoors. So there is a bit of lack of clarity at the moment whether as to more races will go on in Ireland or not. We are very lucky to have national championships penciled in towards the end of February, so that's one extra. But if European indoors is cancelled, it's cancelled again. We just have to move on from it. I love racing indoors, but if it's taken away, I have no choice just to pick myself up and just power straight through, because if I'm like wallowing over it being cancelled again, that's just wasting time into the summer. So with Olympics, hopefully it does go ahead, and hopefully there's a lot of clarity into the dates. But we've adapted before. We've adapted many times. Say the time I broke my foot and come back. So it's just part of the process, and I work well with Shane in preparing for all that.
Is part of the psychology that you've tapped into over the last couple of months focus on the fact that you weren't necessarily in the form of your life, that it was the form of your life to date, but you can get better and that your times can get better? Is your peak yet to come, and is that something you've been thinking about over the last little while?
Absolutely. So like, as I said, it kicked off really well in 2020, and then when we knew that nothing was going to count for 2020, for the remainder of 2020, Shane pulled back the intensity, because I have been going really intense for the last number of years, really from 2013 onwards. So that is hard on an athlete as well. And like, you're obviously preparing for the biggest year of your career with the Olympic pinnacle. So he pulled back the intensity, and as an athlete, you always want to like push through. But I'm now reaping the benefits of that this winter, and know the reason why I needed to like take a little step back, take a reset. We were still training, but we weren't training at the same intensity last summer. So it was great to have that focus with national championships at the end of summer and come out and race, and then just reset again going into 2020. But absolutely, you have to use that focus of the year ahead and use it to your betterment, to improve yourself. And I know that there's so many areas that I can push on and improve on, because there's certainly not every avenue that I have like ticked and excelled at. So yeah, hopefully this year that there will be more great signs to see, and that we can push everything on further to quicker times.
You mentioned there that when restrictions have allowed, you've been able to train with somebody else. I saw Molly Scott saying that she's joined your training group at this point. How big is your team? How many other people do you tend to train with when restrictions allow?
So when restrictions allow, there's anywhere up from like 6 to 8 people, and like Molly lives with me as well, so it's great to have the elite exemptions, and Molly falls under that category as well at the moment. So we still have access to the track, we still have access to the gym. So it is great to have that high performance athlete coming along with you, pushing each other on, having that company. And some of our track sessions overlap, some of them don't, but it's having that person there to push you through, that it's not going to the track on your own. And we're very lucky to have Shane there as well, that he falls under the exemptions as well to travel to us. So it is really important, and it's really important for Molly as well, when she's new into the group, that it's not a year of like carnage as such, whereas like a new athlete coming in and you want everything to go really well. So obviously these are adaptations as well that she has to have made along the way with changes to training, but when we have each other, it makes it all the more easier.
Is there a necessary rivalry that has to exist there between people training together?
I think we just get on really well. Obviously there's going to be that competitive element, but if you see it as a competitor, that brings risks and stuff as well to training. So we get on really well. We know to work within our zones. One day some person might be feeling really well, then the other person doesn't push as such to try and chase, and it's just about being smart and training smart. But end of the day, we both support each other, and it is good in a way as well that I have the 200 and the 400 to focus on, whereas Molly is focusing on the 60 and the 100. So we both bring different aspects, and she can learn off me from different things that I've done before as well. So no, it's really good, and it's great to have another girl in the group as well.
Phil, do you think the Olympics is going to happen? What's your gut instinct about what is likely to happen in Tokyo this year?
Obviously, last year it was cancelled very early around March time, but now we know so much more to do with the pandemic and different things like that. So hopefully, like, every athlete just wants to believe that it does go ahead. Obviously, there's so much at stake for the Olympic Federation, like in terms of costs and different things like that if it is cancelled. So as an athlete, I do want this to go ahead and not to be transferred to 2024 now, but let's hope things can go in the right direction. And even here at home, that we can lower the curve and we can lower the numbers, and people can stay at home and protect themselves in order for normal life as such, if it's ever been as normal as it was, to resume in some sort of fashion.
And so, because I know reading, there was a Guardian piece last week where there was doubt cast over the Olympics, but the end line in Sean Ingall's piece was some version of the Olympics is expected to go ahead in Tokyo. It may mean that everybody has to go over quite far in advance and quarantine when you get there. Athletes famously will literally go to the ends of the earth to compete in their event. Are you willing to go to Tokyo 6 weeks early and quarantine and isolate if you have to, if that's what it requires to get this done? Are you willing to take the vaccine and all that kind of stuff if that's what's required to compete?
Absolutely. You work so hard, you make so much sacrifices for any normal year, and then Olympics is another level up from that. So there's so much involved in the year, so much that people don't see, and they just see Olympics as the end point, but not all the ups and downs in between. So 100% any athlete is going to do whatever they can to get to Olympics, and if that means going out earlier, again, it just comes back to adaptations. And I think every athlete has learned to adapt and push on with their non-normal circumstances. So it's just another step along the way that you overcome, and if it happens to be a different Olympics, then it's Olympics at the end of the day.
Do you know when I was going to just ask about when your next race might actually be at the moment?
So at the moment, National Championships is definitely one of my targets, and hopefully European Indoors will go ahead after that. So it will be over 400 indoors, so I'm definitely looking forward to that. We didn't have major championships indoors last year with the cancellation of World Champs. So if it goes ahead, absolutely super. If it doesn't, we just move on, and Olympics is obviously the main goal this summer.
Well, I was actually just going to ask about the 400 metres there. How much has that event tweaked your training a little bit? Has it always been a big focus for you?
Like last year, we always set out that the 200 was going to be the main focus of the indoor season, because you can collect high points towards Olympic ranking. So I definitely achieved that with the 23:10, breaking the national record at AIT Grand Prix, because it was a high graded race as well. So it has an extra weighting of points, and then I did the same at national champs. So that has ticked the box for me with Olympic ranking points, because you can only hold 2 times from indoor. So that is that 200 box tick. So necessarily we don't need to race over 200 this indoor season. So for me, the 400 was always going to be the focus of this 2021 season, even if Olympics obviously went ahead in 2020 as planned. So for me, my training always has a mixture of the 200 side and the 400 side, because that's what works for me. It necessarily doesn't work for other athletes, but I do love mixing up the two, and it changes the focus as well between the two.
Well, listen, Phil, all the best for 2021. Hopefully there will be big events for us to all watch you competing over the next few months, and hopefully the Olympics do go ahead. Take care, Phil, and thanks a million for taking the call.
Super, thanks a million.
Best of luck.
Thanks a million.
Phil Healy there on the line, Ireland's fastest woman.